Well, they're ready here. Are you ready wherever you are, online audience? Hello to you again. Nice to have you back. Now, we would normally have started this event with a patient, but unfortunately, Richard Ballarand was unable at the last minute due to his health to be here. So we've asked another patient to step in at the last minute, and I hope that by some magic, we're going to have Robert Joyce appear. Is Robert Joyce going to appear?
Yes, I'm here.
Ah, hello. Hey, Robert, can you tell us, first of all, a bit about you? Because I suspect you're Irish. I know you're Irish. Where are you today?
I'm living in my man cave at the moment in the west of Ireland. I live in a beautiful place called Connemara, and I was born and reared here, but I did spend some time abroad living in the United States and in the UK.
You've been a patient all your life, one way and another. Just tell us briefly your patient journey before we start talking about decentralized trials.
Well, as a young child, I had childhood asthma, which I still continue with today. And that would have obviously have meant that I had visits to hospitals when I had a very bad attack. But when I was 23 or 22, actually, when I came back to Ireland for my graduation, I felt some strange sensations in my feet. And within 3 months, I was diagnosed with having multiple sclerosis. And I suppose that was the first time I was involved with a trial of such, where I was one of the first people that they used an MRI scanner enhanced with gadolinium, which helps to show lesions in multiple sclerosis. So I had relapsing remitting MS for quite a long time. Sorry?
So life was not kind to you because you then had a car crash, which then added another layer of burden. Tell us about that bit.
Well, prior to that car crash, I had 10 years without any symptoms. And with that car crash, which was a really small accident, but it did something to my neck, and I've had consistent pain since that time. So my pain level on any day always starts with a level 5 out of 10. And depending on the circumstances, even a conversation like this can bring my pain levels up to a level 8 or an even 9. And that debilitates me for the remainder of that day and more than likely the following day.
Thank you for talking us, because I have to tell you, I feel no pain talking to you. It's only a pleasure for me. Just tell me about decentralized trials, and what are your initial thoughts about them, and have you taken part in any of them?
Well, firstly, I've never taken part in a decentralized trial, but the concept of it to me is incredibly appealing. One of the issues that I, with multiple sclerosis, I've mobility problems, and I also have fatigue issues. And that means attending any appointments for a trial can be really challenging. So for example, last week, I was part of another study that was looking for new biomarkers for multiple sclerosis. And that required me to drive to Galway, which for me is about a 1.5 hour drive, which has a physical cost to me in pain, extra pain, but also extra fatigue, and it can fall over onto the following day. So it's a cost that I have to incur to be involved in these studies. And that is really challenging. And it would be much easier if the work that they needed to do, the bloods that they needed to draw, the saliva and all that stuff was done with my local GP, which is a much closer visit. And it is easier for it to fit into my schedule. But also the venues that you go to can be very challenging for people. But the big dream I have with decentralized trials is that when you start dealing with illnesses, say like multiple sclerosis, and you have comorbidities with it, it is very hard to get a sample size sufficient in one small area. So then you really need to go large and international so that you can get that adequate sample size. And I think that's where one of the great opportunities is for people like me that have comorbidities, that our needs will be addressed at some stage because of decentralized trials.
And you're a UPATI fellow, and you spend an enormous amount of time in being you're a patient embedded patient, not a patient in bed, an embedded patient in several areas, I think particularly in MS. But when you talk to your fellow UPATI fellows, what are their views on decentralized trials? Because presumably some of them are involved. And what do you think they think the challenges are?
So they're all excited about it because it brings tremendous benefits to all of us, but there are a number of challenges. One is, and for me, it's a big one, is the consistency of treatment between sites and the way consent is done between different sites. Because I know in my experience of dealing with one hospital versus another hospital, they have different methods and procedure, either the way they capture their data or the standard protocols that they use for treating a patient. And in any trial, you're going to have a control sample. And if that control sample is distributed in different locations, is that treatment going to be the same for all of them? And then when you come to the actual treatment, because it's not being done in one location, there isn't that degree of oversight I can see. So you can get individuals doing something a little bit different that could confound the studies. And that is a challenge that I think that there can be ways of overcoming, but people are people. And we tend to do things our own way, or the way that we understand that we've been asked to do.
So people living with long-term conditions, one of the major things for them is the relationship that they have with their physician or their team. And do you think decentralized trials could change that relationship?
I don't think decentralized trials will change that relationship. I don't think that would be the case, because your team is your team. Being involved in a trial is something a little bit outside of what you're doing. But if that trial is being conducted in your place of normal care, your team will still be there. So I don't see an issue in that, unless to be part of it, I have to go to a different location, start getting different treatments, and then the communication process between your normal care team and the study care team, what is that communication going to be like? And will information flow from the trial to my regular care team so that in the future they understand whatever treatments have been happening to me? And that is the issue with control of data and information, and who actually owns that information. And my belief is any test that has been done on my body and anything that's been injected into my body is my information and should naturally flow over to my care team. But trials have funny ways with their protocols, and that can be a challenge.
That's a wonderful quote. Trials have funny ways with their protocols. Note that down. But tell me, are you confident, and actually more widely, do you think that patients will be confident about the protection of their data with these decentralized trials?
I think that will only come once there are uniform ways of collecting healthcare data. So, for example, here in Ireland, in GP practices across the country, there are 4 main data collection systems that are used, and then there are other smaller ones, and they don't communicate together. And that doesn't also communicate with the hospitals within Ireland. So there is this fragmentation of data. And until we get this uniform system of healthcare data that the patient is able to say, well, I want this team to have access to my information. I want, that hospital, I want to give my information to these for various studies. But until we have a uniform database of that all your patient data is in one spot that you can control, because at the moment it's all over the place. And if I get a treatment, say in Spain, and then I come back to Ireland, how does that communicate back and forth? And that I think is one of the biggest challenges. It should be an easy solve. It's literally only a database. But to get the different institutions and the different practitioners to accept a uniform system seems to be incredibly challenging. In the work that I've been doing with the Health Service Executive here in Ireland on their development of their clinical systems for research, that is the big challenge. Each hospital has its own way of collecting data, and they have their own standards, and they say this is the way it has to happen in our hospital. And unless that is uniform across all of healthcare, I think there's going to be a big challenge.
It's a challenge, I think, that everybody recognises and would like to solve. One of the things we've been talking about this morning is whether decentralised trials are a huge opportunity to increase the diversity of people that are included in trials, or whether on the other side there actually could be a further barrier to inclusivity, because you need good broadband very often for these decentralised trials, which perhaps exclude rural populations or people who find the cost of broadband limiting. So where are you on that divide? Will decentralised trials make trials more inclusive or less inclusive?
I think in general, they will be more inclusive. It will always be a challenge to get the marginal in society to be involved in trials. It is very hard to access everybody. And whether it could be elderly people who are suffering from dementia, for example, and can they give proper consent, or how do they do that whole assenting process? So that's just on the consent thing. But when you're coming to, say, for example, doing this like a Zoom call with your GP, or the study that you're being involved with, there is sometimes a need to be physically there, because you can see things in person that you can't. And that's where I think linking in with the local GP practices is where the opportunity is, because they will have access to good broadband, and they will have the facilities, and they will have the medics there. And most patients have regular contact with their GP practices. Now, does this mean that they need to have an extra room available for people who are involved in studies? Is there going to be enough of that type of activity to justify giving over that space? And does the GP practice want to be involved as well? Like that, those are also issues. But I think if we can solve that, then we definitely will have much more access to a diverse population. I know, like for myself here living in the west of Ireland, access to hospitals is very challenging because of the distance and the time that it takes. And that stops an awful lot of people. So if I could do it with my GP practice, that would speed things up and make it more accessible to me to be a participant in a trial. But that doesn't necessarily solve the marginalized people who have a fear, say, for example, of research or of government or organizations, and whether they can trust what is going on. And we need that pool of people as well to be involved in research so that we can actually help them with their medical needs.
There's a real need to address the perceptions of clinical trials done in this way in order to make sure that we get the people that we need to get into the trials. But in general, do you think that decentralized trials could have a beneficial impact on recruitment into trials?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's no question that they're going to improve recruitment, and they will improve the diversity of recruitment. The big question, and as you alluded in your question, is the perception of research. And research or science is going through a hard time at the moment because for some reason there's a sizable minority who don't believe in what science is and how it works and the methods of it. And this is where I think the power of having patients involved in the research, not as participants, but actually part of the team of research, will help to break down that barrier between the patient community and the research community. We need to be working together. And I saw that particularly in the trial that I was the embedded researcher on. My being there and me sharing what the study was and why we needed participants in the study, that actually gave confidence to many more participants to become involved in the study. We were struggling in getting participants until I actually went on radio and newspapers and asked people to come. And because I was living with the condition, I am one of that tribe. There's an immediate trust between us. And if I am part of the team that is doing this research, that helps to create trust in that research. And the more patients that researchers engage in the process of putting together their trials, figuring out the questions and the method that these studies will be conducted, the greater trust there will be from the patient community. And hopefully, ultimately, all of these stakeholders will end up becoming one, and we will be just one stakeholder, not different stakeholders, because the ultimate goal of all of this is that my quality of life and people like me's qualities of lives will improve. We will be healthier and we will be a greater contribution to society. And I think society as a whole will be better for it.
You make that point incredibly eloquently. Thank you so much. And we take your point also about science. Despite the fact that we've seen COVID vanquished almost vanquished by science, actually there has been an extraordinary backlash with anti-vaxxers, and there's all sorts of other areas. In my own particular area of genomics, there's also been a big backlash. And that's a real worry which could affect uptake to trials in the future. So what you do is fantastically important. And I wondered, because we've got a number of regulators and funders in the room, whether you feel that patient involvement in this type of trial should be mandated by regulators and agencies right from the very start. I mean, it's certainly something that in some of the UK funding agencies, that's mandated, but whether you think that that should be much more widely extended.
I certainly think it must be much more widely extended. However, I also think that I think these organizations should be seeing now the positive contribution of including patients early on in the research process and throughout the process. We actually bring a valuable part into the research process, and we can help to actually reduce costs. We can actually help to improve retention of participants in studies. And these all make those studies far more effective. And we also can help to ensure that what is being researched is going to be, the outcome of that research will be of benefit to the community and something that we want to use and uptake. So I'm reluctant to say that it should be mandated, but I think we as patients and those who have used patients in research need to be shouting the story of how the benefits that have accrued to those trials as a result of including patients in it. And then the uptake will be obvious. It makes life easier for everybody. And ultimately, we will get research done faster, more cost effectively, and more suitable for the people who need these medicines.
Fantastic. Any questions in the room, or have any comments online coming in? One moment.
Just a great comment. So great words from Robert, a real patient. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, I'm very aware that actually talking causes you pain after a while. So I'm going to draw this to a close, but say thank you very much, not only for coming here today at such very, very short notice, but also because you are a wonderful exemplar of what patients mean and can do for all clinical trials. And I hope that decentralized trials will encourage you actually to get a wider number of patients involved who will be comfortable with these techniques, particularly younger patients, and that we're set fair for a future of decentralized trials with patients absolutely in the driving seat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.